What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka New York Prepper. It is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022, and I have a World War III alert to share with you guys. Just wanted to give you an update on the situation in Ukraine and the possibility of World War III. Now, before I get into the news, I just want to say that there's been people who have been saying that I'm fear-mongering and I'm trying to scare people, and they've been saying this for weeks now. And look at where we are, okay? When I first started covering this situation about 2 months ago, people were saying that I was fear-mongering and nothing was going to happen. And look at the point we're at right now, okay? We have never seen this level of tensions between the U.S. and Russia ever. Even the Cuban Missile Crisis doesn't compare to what's happening right now. If you remember, the Cuban Missile Crisis only lasted about a month. And once JFK told the Soviets that he didn't want the missiles there anymore, the Soviets pulled the missiles out and the crisis was over. But this crisis that we're having now is lingering, and it's decades in the making, guys. The tensions between Russia and NATO have been there for a long, long time. And they're finally starting to bubble up to the surface now, and we're finally starting to see it manifest in front of our eyes. So I want to just give you the latest information that I have. So there's word now that Ukraine might be getting some THAAD missile launchers. Now, THAAD stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, and THAAD is basically very similar to the Russian S-400 system. It can shoot down short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles. It's basically like the Patriot missiles, but on steroids. And the Ukrainian government has been requesting that the United States set up the THAAD systems in Ukraine. Specifically, they wanted some of them in Kharkiv, but I'm sure they want them in Kiev as well and some other critical areas. Now, South Korea has some THAAD launchers set up. And so basically these THAAD launchers are the American equivalent of the S-400. They use a hit-to-kill kinetic energy missile interception. What they do is they actually hit the incoming missile with a hard object that breaks the missile up. And they can basically intercept pretty much all of Russian missiles with this system, short to medium range missiles. They can't intercept ICBMs with these THAAD launchers, but they can intercept things like Iskander missiles and some of the medium range tactical missiles that Russia has. And that's basically what THAAD is designed for. It's designed for intermediate range missiles that are a little bit too fast for the Patriot system. Now, the Patriot system is already deployed in parts of Eastern Europe. Poland has a bunch of them. Romania has a bunch of them. And actually, Romania has THAAD launchers already. But now Ukraine is requesting THAAD interceptors being set up in Ukraine. So I want to just read to you the latest on this, because this could be a trigger for a Russian invasion to happen very soon, because Russia does not want those THAAD launchers right on their border, because if they were to invade Ukraine in the future, if those THAAD launchers are there, it's going to basically eliminate the Russian missile capabilities, okay? They're not going to be able to use their missiles against Ukraine anymore, because the THAAD launcher would intercept all of them. So now that there's news breaking that the THAAD systems might be going to Ukraine, this could motivate Russia to invade sooner before they can get those THAAD systems set up, because once those THAAD systems are set up, it's going to basically eliminate Russia's ability to use missiles against targets in Ukraine. Okay, so I want to read the latest information that I have here. So Russia is not happy about this. They're saying, do not send THAADs to Ukraine. Moscow urges Washington not to bring the situation to a standstill by handing over the THAAD anti-ballistic system to Ukraine. We hope that the situation in Ukraine will not deteriorate to such an extent that Russia will be forced to respond militarily. We urge the United States not to supply missiles to Ukraine, said Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Pankin. So this is a very serious situation, guys. The fact that they have these THAAD launchers now that could be going into possibly in Kharkiv or Kharkov, which is a city right on the border of Russia. And they're going to set up radars there, and the radars can see inside of Russian airspace for up to 1,000 kilometers, which is really far. They could basically see all the way to Moscow. And Russia is threatening to possibly hit these launchers with their missiles to take them out, which they won't be able to do. But it's definitely going to make Putin very mad to hear this, and I'm sure he's very mad right now. But this is very serious, and I wanted to report this to you. Okay, so Ukraine could be getting the THAAD missile systems, terminal high-altitude area defense. Just think of it as the Patriot missiles on steroids. And this would nullify Russia's air power and nullify their missile power. And it would basically reduce the war to a ground war. Because if they try to launch missiles, these THAAD launchers would intercept many of the big ones. So this would be a huge shift in the war if Ukraine gets these missile launchers very soon, these anti-ballistic missiles. This would change a lot for the war, and it would nullify a lot of Russia's capabilities, especially their air power, which they have a huge advantage in the air and in the missiles. So if this happens, this is going to really inflame the situation. I want to just read to you what the terminal high-altitude area defense is, some of the specifics. So here you have a picture of the THAAD launcher launching the missile, which is a kinetic energy projectile. This missile actually hits another missile that's coming in, and it breaks it apart. Okay, and these are deployed into South Korea. It was formerly known as the Theater High Altitude Area Defense, is an American anti-ballistic missile system designed to shoot down short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles in their terminal phase by intercepting with a hit-to-kill approach. THAAD was developed after the experience of Iraq's Scud missile attacks during the Gulf War in 1991. The THAAD interceptor carries no warhead but relies on its kinetic energy of impact to destroy the incoming missile. A kinetic energy hit minimizes the risk of exploding conventional warhead ballistic missiles, and the warhead of nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles will not detonate upon a kinetic energy impact. So that's why they have these guys, because if they're not going to set off a nuclear weapon, if, let's say, Russia launches a few dozen tactical nukes into Ukraine, if they hit them with this THAAD system, it's not going to set those nukes off, versus a Patriot system. The traditional Patriot systems, they use an explosion. Now the newer Patriot systems also use a hit-to-kill approach. The latest PAC-3 missiles that the Patriot missile system uses, they also use hit-to-kill. And right now, the countries that have them deployed are Guam, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, Romania, and South Korea, okay? So these are designed to hit the warhead on the terminal approach, meaning after the missile goes up into the air and the terminal phase of the missile means that the canisters of fuel have already been discarded, and the warhead is all the way up in its apex, and it's coming back down to Earth, and it's going to steer itself with small jets that are built into the warhead, just enough to steer it towards the target. And so that's the terminal phase, okay? It's kind of like if you play baseball and you throw a ball up into the air. The way that this missile system works is as the ball hits its peak in the air and you throw that ball to your buddy up in the air, after it hits the peak in the air and it starts to come back down, that's when this missile system would intercept, okay? So it's a very powerful system, and this could inflame the situation. If Ukraine gets these launchers, it's going to take this whole conflict to a whole nother level. And I don't think Russia was expecting that. They were expecting maybe that the West would just, let Ukraine fend for themselves and throw them to the wolves. But it looks like America is making big moves here. This would be a huge move, okay? And this would really inflame the situation. Now, also, there's war games going on right now, joint war games. Belarus and Russia are holding war games right now, military exercises. Also, Ukraine and NATO are also holding exercises right now. And also, there's been 6 Russian warships that have moved into the Black Sea. Some of them are amphibious landing warships. They came all the way from Russia's Baltic Fleet, which is in Kaliningrad, right next to Poland and Lithuania. And they came all the way from there, and they went to the Black Sea, and they moved 6 warships into the Black Sea, guys. Okay, they're not doing that just for an exercise. They're doing that because they're possibly going to invade Ukraine from the coastline. Why else would they have amphibious landing ships? Okay, they're going to go for Odessa. They're going to go for the Black Sea coast, and they're positioning all their assets ahead of time. So I wanted to just share this with you. This is very, very serious. Here's a good picture that I found showing the location of all of Russia's forces right now. You could see a heavy concentration here in southeastern Belarus, where the Russian, Belarusian, and Ukrainian borders meet together. You can see a huge concentration of forces here, and you can see how close they are to Kiev, okay? All these red dots here, the larger the red dot means more troops, okay? So these giant red dots here are 5,000 plus troops. And you can see there's just all over here, all around Ukraine, but there's a heavy, heavy concentration here just within striking distance of Kiev. They could actually even hit Kiev with long-range artillery from these areas here. They don't even have to cross the border. They could hit Ukraine with artillery from this area here. They wouldn't even have to cross the border. You can see right here in Belgorod, which is literally right across from Kharkiv, there's a huge concentration of troops in Belgorod right now. There's been fighter jets, Russian fighter jets that have been observed over here. So it's a very, very tense situation, guys. Also, today, Biden spoke publicly, and he's urging Americans to get out as soon as possible. And he was also saying that he's going to try to end the Nord Stream 2 project, which I don't think he has a way of doing that because that's Germany's pipeline. So ultimately, it's up to Germany to decide. I don't know. You could watch the whole video, but he was asked, how is he going to end the pipeline, because it's not his pipeline, it's Germany's. And Germany has shown that they're siding with Russia so far. And he said, don't worry, we have a way of doing it. So does that mean that maybe he's going to sabotage the pipeline? Are we going to deploy some kind of underwater assets that can, cut the pipeline with torches underwater and sabotage it? All these things are possible, guys. The U.S. military has a lot of capabilities that we don't even know about. All right, everybody says that our military is old and stuff like that, and Russia has better hypersonic missiles, but the truth of the matter is that the American military is still the most powerful in the world. We have 10 times the size of our defense budget is 10 times bigger than Russia's or China's. So we have a lot of stuff that we don't know about, and I don't know what he was referring to when he said, don't worry, we'll take care of it, but does it mean that he's going to try to sabotage it if, let's say, Germany decides not to listen to the West and side with Russia and continue with the Nord Stream pipeline? Is he going to get involved and physically try to sabotage the pipeline? That's a very real possibility, guys, and they have that capability. But he is urging Ukrainians to leave Ukraine. I want to just play this clip, what he said earlier.
to the Americans who are currently in Ukraine? Should they leave the country?
I think it'd be wise to leave the country. I'm not talking about our diplomatic corps. I'm talking about Americans who are there. I hate to see them get caught in a crossfire if, in fact, they did admit it. And there's no need for that. And if I had anyone there, I'd say leave. Talking about our diplomatic corps. I'm talking about Americans who are there. I hate to see them get caught in a crossfire if, in fact, they did admit it.
Hear what he said? He said that he would hate to see our American citizens get caught in the crossfire. Very ominous words from our president, guys. Canada is also warning Ukrainians to leave while they still can. They're saying here, this is coming from Canadian news, CBC, which is one of the Canadian news channels or newspapers, says here transportation, electricity, medical care could be disrupted if Russia invades. The federal government is advising Canadians in Ukraine to leave the country as soon as possible amid the threat of a possible Russian military invasion. The warning was included in an email Global Affairs Canada sent to Canadians in Ukraine this week. If you are in Ukraine, you should leave while commercial means are available, said the email. The ability of our embassy to provide consular services in Ukraine may become severely limited. You should not depend on the government of Canada to help you leave the country. The email was sent to 780 Canadians in Ukraine registered for the government's registration of Canadians abroad services. So they only sent this email out to Canadians that were actually registered to receive these notifications. But there could be thousands and thousands of other Canadians there. Russian military action in Ukraine could disrupt transportation routes and services throughout the country. Flights could be disrupted or canceled on short notice, resulting in delayed departure, the email also said. It warns Canadians in Ukraine of the potential for widespread disruptions to essential services, including electricity, water and food, telecommunications, emergency services, and medical care. Canadians who decide to stay in Ukraine are advised to review your personal security plans and be prepared to shelter in place if required. Okay, that's pretty ominous, guys. All right, when your government is telling you review your personal security plans and be prepared to shelter in place, that is very, very ominous, guys. If you're in Ukraine and you're a Westerner, you should try to get out as quickly as you can. It's going to be very bad. The war is basically imminent. It's going to break out any day now, especially with news of those THAAD launchers coming into Ukraine. Russia's going to try to invade before those THAAD launchers come in, because that's going to really make it a lot more difficult for Russia to invade once those THAAD launchers are set up. And for all we know, they could already be set up. They could have already started setting them up last year when Russia moved all the troops last year. It's possible that I've said for many months now that I believe that there's already Patriot missiles set up in Kiev to protect Kiev. And I would not be surprised if they already have THAAD launchers on their way right now, or maybe even have them there already. So pretty ominous words from the Canadian government telling citizens to evacuate, take shelter in place. Russian atomic cannons have moved closer to Ukraine's borders. Here's a picture of one of these giant 203 millimeter artillery. 203 millimeters, guys. That is insane. Okay. That is just massive. Just for your reference, 25 millimeters equals 1 inch. Okay. So this is 203 millimeter artillery. So that's about an 8-inch diameter bore. Okay. An 8-inch diameter artillery shell. Okay. That is just massive. Russia has not let up with a military buildup along the border with Ukraine and deployed to border areas its 203 millimeter self-propelled gun that could fire tactical nuclear shells. Okay. So they can actually put nuclear warheads on these artillery shells, because these artillery shells are massive. Now, normal artillery is usually 155 millimeter. So this is 50 millimeters bigger This is substantially bigger than a normal self-propelled artillery, okay, like a howitzer. Actually, howitzers are not self-propelled, but this is basically 25 to 50% larger than a howitzer, and they can put nuclear shells on them because it's so big that they could put nuclear warheads on them. Social media users posted videos showing two S-7 Pion self-propelled artillery guns at Vesela Lopan in Belgorod region, just 17 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. All right, Belgorod is critical, guys. Remember that map I showed you earlier? Belgorod there's been a lot of activity there in the last couple of weeks. There was videos of fighter jets flying over, Russian fighter jets doing practice maneuvers. Belgorod is right next to Kharkiv. It's on the Russian side. It's like the sister city of Kharkiv. You know, it's right over the border opposite of Kharkiv, and there's been a lot of activity there. This is very concerning. 10 miles from the Ukrainian border, they have these massive, artillery guns that can fire nuclear warheads, okay? The 2S7 self-propelled gun, known popularly as the Soviet atomic cannon, can carry up to 4 203 millimeter nuclear shells that could eliminate targets at a range of 37 kilometers, okay? So 37 kilometers, if you do the math, that's going to be about 20 to 25 miles. So they could easily strike targets in Ukraine. If they're in Belgorod, Kharkiv is within striking distance. They could pepper Kharkiv with all these nuclear artillery, okay? And this isn't indirect fire. So indirect fire means it's not precise. They can't guide it. They generally aim it in a certain area. It's indirect fire. Now, they do have some shells that can guide themselves, but these are usually indirect fire, and that's just completely devastating. They could easily hit Kharkiv from Belgorod. It's just very concerning. And here's a video apparently showing in Belgorod some of the Russian military forces here in Belgorod stationed there. And this is where they saw these atomic cannons being, prepared for their assault. See, there are those cannons. You see them right there? Let's see that again. All right, look at these cannons here. You see these big guns there. All right, you can see the look at that. That is just insane. Look at the size of this bore here. Okay, 203 millimeter, can fire nuclear shells just 10 miles from the Ukrainian border. Okay, they're not putting this there for training exercises. They're not going to be training, in a city in Belgorod with, nuclear mortars or nuclear artillery. Okay, that is just absolutely insane, guys. We are truly living in the end times. If you haven't started preparing, make sure you get everything you need. This is a prepping channel. I have a lot of information on prepping, so you can browse through some of my videos if you want to, learn about how to prepare yourselves for nuclear war. I have an entire playlist on nuclear war. You can check that out. I have a nuclear war survival playlist with like 25 videos. I have a whole series on how to survive a nuclear war that I'm almost finished with. I have 6 videos in that series, an hour and a half long each video. Tons of information about nuclear war survival, jam-packed into all those videos. I highly recommend you watch them. It took me hours to make those videos, so check them out. I made them for you guys free of charge, sharing my information with you, trying to help you guys get prepared. I'm not asking for any money or anything. According to globalsecurity.org, the 2C7 Pion is designed to suppress and eliminate nuclear weapons, artillery, mortars, equipment, rear command posts, and enemy manpower. So this is pretty crazy, guys. Just absolutely insane. And on top of that, Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday warned a nuclear war could break out if Ukraine joins NATO. And I did post a video on that. He said that if Ukraine were to join NATO, it could go nuclear. So very, very concerning, guys. Now, here is a video from CBS. I guess the White House has approved a contingency plan to evacuate Americans from Ukraine in case of a Russian invasion. So I want to play this video for you guys. So let's watch this here.
All-time high in Eastern Europe as the Russia-Ukraine conflict intensifies. CBS News has confirmed the White House has approved a plan to help Americans leave Ukraine if Russia decides to invade its neighbor. This plan comes as Russia begins conducting large-scale joint military exercises with Belarus along the Ukrainian border. In response, Ukraine is carrying out its own.
Now, Belarus has moved S-400, or Russia has moved S-400s into Belarus. That's what these vehicles are. S-400s, like I said, are similar to the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. They're designed for intercepting medium-range ballistic missiles.
In response, Ukraine is carrying out its own drills in preparation for an attack. All this as NATO troops begin training in nearby Estonia in case foreign intervention is needed. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Charlie D'Agata is in Estonia with troops on the ground.
British and Estonian tanks square off against each other in a snowy wasteland not far from the Russian border. NATO partners locked in a simulated battle, with the massive Russian military escalation near Ukraine sending jitters throughout this entire region. These war games have never been more real.
If a conflict were to break out in this region, these are exactly the conditions they'd be dealing with. Deep snow, a difficult terrain, limited visibility against an enemy that far outnumbers these forces in terms of troops and weaponry.
The Baltic states lie right along the borders of Russia and Belarus, each home to a multinational NATO battle group. American reinforcements have been deployed to Poland and Romania, while Moscow has sent tens of thousands of forces to Belarus, part of a massive Russian military buildup. There are still hopes for a diplomatic solution to the crisis in Ukraine, but military preparations are never based on a best-case scenario. Charlie D'Agata, CBS News, Lasna, Estonia.
And CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now for more on this. Hi, Nancy. So what more can you tell us about the White House's contingency plan to evacuate Americans from Ukraine if it becomes necessary?
Well, Tanya, I can tell you that our David Martin at the Pentagon has confirmed that the Pentagon has created this evacuation plan, which calls for U.S. troops to set up receiving stations on the border with Ukraine to help process any Americans that might have to flee Ukraine on land. You heard in Charlie D'Agata's package that there are U.S. troops that have been sent to both Poland and Romania. Those are two countries that border Ukraine. And it's interesting because when we asked White House officials about this evacuation plan this morning, take a listen to what they told us. This is verbatim. To be clear, they said, we are not planning for a mass evacuation of American citizens from Ukraine. What does that mean? It means you're not going to see the kinds of airlifts that we saw in Afghanistan last summer, where hundreds of Americans and allies were flown out of the country. The U.S. does.
I don't believe that, guys. I've been saying for the last few days the 82nd Airborne has been deployed to eastern Poland, which is just 45 miles from the Ukrainian border. The 82nd Airborne did not deploy into Poland to parachute into Poland. Okay, the 82nd Airborne specializes in deploying into denied areas. That's their whole purpose. Okay, so Poland is not a denied area, but Ukraine is going to be when Russia invades. And they positioned those 82nd Airborne just 45 miles from the Ukrainian border in the city of Rzeszów in southeastern Poland, which is that's just very ominous.
The U.S. doesn't have troops in Ukraine. The president says he doesn't intend to put troops in Ukraine. He's very wary of getting bogged down in another conflict so soon after the U.S. has finally left Afghanistan. So that's the reason why you have the president and other White House officials, State Department officials, urging American citizens in Ukraine to leave now if they can and not wait around to see how this conflict plays out.
And Nancy, you'd mentioned the U.S. has deployed troops to support our NATO allies in both Poland and Romania. What's the significance of these two locations in particular?
The significance of these two countries is that they both border Ukraine, but they do not border Russia. So these are two NATO allies, and the U.S. is sworn to protect NATO allies. The U.S. moving troops into position both to help with the evacuation and to send a signal to Russia that the U.S. and other European nations are united against Russian aggression without doing something that could directly provoke Vladimir Putin. If the U.S. were to send troops, let's say, to a country that directly borders Russia, or send troops into Ukraine, which also borders Russia, then Vladimir Putin could use.
So there you guys have it. They're setting up receiving stations on the Ukrainian border, probably in Poland and other areas. I don't believe what she's saying here. I also don't believe, Brandon, that we're not going to send troops into Ukraine. I really don't believe that. No president is going to go out there and say, yeah, we're going to send troops into Ukraine. It just lacks, that just eliminates any form of surprise. You know, it eliminates the element of surprise. It lacks common sense. Brandon is not going to say that, but he can definitely do it now. He's got thousands of paratroopers, including the division commander of the 82nd Airborne is in Poland now. Okay, the commander of the whole division of the 82nd Airborne is in Poland. All right, that is a very ominous sign. So I wanted to just share that with you. They're setting up those receiving stations on the border with Ukraine, but I do believe they are going to deploy troops into Ukraine depending on how far Putin pushes his forces into Russia, or into Ukraine, I'm sorry. Here's pictures from the Ministry of Defense of Belarus. And these are Russian S-400 anti-missile systems. And they've been deployed to the Brest region of southwestern Belarus, which is actually formerly a Polish city. Brest was a Polish city for hundreds of years. And after the breakup of Poland during World War II, the Soviet Union kept that land. After Poland was split apart between Germany and Russia, the Russians kept this part of Poland and they annexed it into the Soviet Union. So this is a Polish city, and Belarus is getting Russian anti-missile systems set up in Brest. And this is just a few miles away from the Polish border. And I think that's very significant that they're putting this so close to Poland, which is a NATO country. And they are doing training, but these S-400s are going to stay there. Okay, they're going to stay there. And Belarus and Russia are known as a union state. So they're basically one country now. Belarus is basically one country. It's part of Russia now. Okay, so that's very significant, guys. Anti-missile systems just a few miles from the Polish border. Now, these S-400 missiles, they can cover several hundred miles. They can intercept they can cover a huge area. Once these missiles are up in Brest in southwestern Belarus, they can basically deny the airspace to all of Poland and the Baltics with these battalions here. Any kind of fighter jets or missiles that would be launched out of Poland could be shot down by these systems. Okay, these systems can go very far, several hundred miles. They can intercept air targets. They're primarily used to intercept missiles, but they could shoot down aircraft with them as well. So this is a very provocative move by Russia. And this is just another example of Putin's psychology. You know, he expects America not to put THAAD missiles into Ukraine. Meanwhile, he's allowed to put S-400s just a few miles from the Polish border. So he wants the West to give him everything, and he doesn't want to give anything in return. And so, you know, on one hand, I feel I understand where he's coming from with the Ukraine joining NATO, but on the other hand, it's not a fair negotiation here for him to be putting missiles 5 miles from the Polish border and then saying that we want you not to put missiles on our border. So he's kind of being a hypocrite here, you know, and that's just not the way you negotiate. You know, you don't negotiate by demanding and and being a hypocrite, you have to meet in the middle. So Zelensky and Macron met yesterday, and Macron is going to speak with Biden on the phone. He's going to talk about the whole thing and what he talked about with Putin and Zelensky. Or Brandon is going to speak with Macron, and Macron is going to debrief him on his meetings with Zelensky and Putin. So here's the flight path of 2 more C-17s loaded with 82nd Airborne troops. These are going into the same city in southeastern Poland that I mentioned earlier, Rzeszów, which is just 45 miles from the Ukraine border in southeastern Poland. It's the biggest city in Poland that's close to Ukraine. It's the closest big city to Ukraine, if you want to call it a big city. It's not really a big city, but it's fairly large, and it's only 45 miles away, and there's 2 more C-17s going there now. Here we have some flight paths of some ISR planes. You can see they've been making their rounds. They've really been picking up steam. You can see a bunch of flights here over Latvia, Lithuania. You have these Beechcraft guardrails and Bombardier Challengers. These are reconnaissance and surveillance intelligence collection planes. You can see they flew right next to the Belarus border, and then they flew along the Kaliningrad border here in northeastern Poland. So a lot of military activity all over, guys. Here's more reconnaissance planes flying all over. You can see here in Crimea, you can see some flight paths here. They made several passes around Crimea, Sevastopol. You can see that there was one plane here, ISR plane, that flew close to Donbass and Kharkiv. Then you can see another one here that flew near Lithuania and Belarus here, eastern Poland area. You can see a bunch of flights here in Latvia. So lots of ISR activity going on. They're trying to collect information on Russia's troops and positions, where they're located. Here's a P-8 Poseidon flight path. This is a nuclear sniffer plane, and there must have been some kind of nuclear missile submarine in the waters here of northwestern Norway, and they deployed this P-8 Poseidon. They were flying around looking for maybe possibly a Russian nuclear missile sub. Very interesting, guys. Here's a picture of some more military aid going to the Ukrainians in the Boryspil International Airport in Kiev. Another 80 tons of 7.62 millimeter ammunition. So just crates and crates of ammo being shipped to Kiev. And this is an interesting video here of what appears to be a Russian tank that flipped over. This is somewhere in eastern Ukraine or in Russia. This was a truck that was carrying a tank. And you can see that, I guess they're in such a rush to move all these pieces of equipment here that the truck driver must have lost control, or maybe his tie downs broke and the tank fell off the truck while he was driving. But looks like maybe a T-90. This is a expensive tank too. This is one of Russia's better tanks. This looks like a T-90. And these T-90s are pretty big, so they put them on these flatbed trucks here. And it's pretty interesting. I've seen a lot in the last couple of weeks of these accidents. This is what happens when a country is in such a rush to position their forces. They make mistakes. And this is just a crazy sight here. Could you imagine going to work, and on your way to work, you see an upside down tank on the side of the road? I mean, that's crazy. But that's what it looks like in Russia, guys. They're scrambling to get all their forces in position before Brandon sets up the THAAD launchers and before NATO can reinforce Ukraine. They're really scrambling now because Putin doesn't want to have a big fight. He wants an easy victory. Here's a picture of a U.S. soldier from the 82nd Airborne Division reading a Russian language study guide before his deployment to Eastern Europe. This is in Fort Bragg. And this is very interesting, guys. Why is he studying Russian language if they're not going to be deploying into Ukraine? Okay, if they're just going to be staying in Poland, why does he need to learn Russian? It's clear that they're preparing these guys for a deployment into Ukraine. I'm telling you. So this is very interesting. Here's a flight path of some Black Hawks that were flying from Germany into Poland here. I'm not sure where they landed, but somewhere in Poland, it looks like some attack helicopters. Here's a video of a radio relay station spotted in Belgorod, which I've said many times is a very critical area for the Russians now for their invasion. It's just 10 miles from the border. This is where they have the nuclear cannons that I was talking about earlier, the 2S7 Pions. And you can see this is a relay station. So this is basically like a giant mobile antenna that they can set up to have the forces communicate. You can see these giant antennas here. So they park this thing, and what they do is this is like a mobile transmitter. So, if you think about like the radio systems, shortwave radio systems that the troops use to communicate, they need to have antennas in order to be able to communicate with each other. So what they do is they drive this truck, they find a good spot and they park it and they extend the antennas up, and that allows the Russian troops to communicate with each other using their radios. This is very ominous, guys. I mean, to have one of these just, somewhere in right on the border of Ukraine in Belgorod, right off the side of the road. This is not for training purposes, guys. They are getting ready for an invasion. You don't set up a radio relay station unless you're getting ready to make some serious moves, So you just think of this as like a portable antenna, a giant antenna array. Here's some pictures of Ukrainian citizens that have been training with the Ukrainian military. And yeah, they are using wooden, cutouts of AKs. But, a lot of people have been making fun of it and saying, oh, they're training with wooden AKs. How are they going to fight against the Russian military? Well, that's how you train. I mean, even when you join the military, well, the military is different. But if you join a police force, they usually train you with plastic guns first to get you used to gun safety and gun handling and, proper body dynamics. There's a lot more that goes into shooting than just using live ammunition. Actually, 95% of shooting, it doesn't matter if the ammunition is live or not. It has a lot to do with fundamentals of marksmanship, which you can practice without ammunition. So they're using wooden AKs because it's cheaper and it's safer. And for somebody, you got to understand, you see there's women here. They're at the point where they're so desperate that they're training women to fight. Okay. These people have never shot firearms before. So they're not just going to give them a loaded AK with a 30-round banana clip and say, here you go, let's go train. That's a recipe for disaster. People would shoot each other. They would shoot themselves. So they have to start small. You have to walk before you can run. And so all these ignorant people out there that are mocking the Ukrainian military and saying, oh, they're training with wood, it doesn't mean anything. You got to use your common sense and use your brain before you run your mouth and think critically. Don't just, fly off at the handle on something you know zero about. This is actually very smart. What they're doing is they're getting the citizens comfortable with firearm fundamentals. That is more important than using live ammo. And I'm sure they're going to graduate with live ammo eventually once they get comfortable with the wood and practicing safe gun handling and stuff like that. You don't need live ammo to do that. So this is actually very intelligent, but this is very serious, guys. You have women here. I mean, this woman looks like she's married. She's got a wedding ring on. I mean, this is serious, guys. When a country is at this point, that's a very serious situation here. Here's some more photos of Ukrainian citizens training. with these wooden AKs, practicing. Residents take part in a military exercise for civilians conducted by veterans of the Ukrainian National Guard Azov Battalion amid the threat of Russian invasion. So they're going to be training their citizens. That's really their best chance. If they can get the U.S. to set up air defenses and they can get the U.S. to set up those THAAD and Patriot missiles, then they don't have to worry about the missiles and the airstrikes. Then they only have to worry about the ground attacks. And they have the Javelin missiles. The Javelin missiles can easily take out the Russian T-72s. The T-72s have no protection against Javelins. They don't have any active and passive countermeasures. And then they're going to train their citizens. And there's a lot of Ukrainians. The Ukraine has a hefty population. They have like 40 million people. So if they even train like 25% of their population with just basic training, how to shoot an AK, how to, basic movements. They don't have to be Navy SEALs. They just need to know the basics, how to shoot and move, how to take cover, how to reload, just basic stuff. They can teach their whole population within a matter of weeks. And then they can just hand out rifles and ammo to everybody in the country. And then you're talking about a massive guerrilla force. And nobody wants to deal with that. I know the Russian military is huge. But if they try to go into some of these cities, the Ukrainians are going to dig in, just like the Vietnamese literally dug in and made tunnels. And it's going to be a recipe for disaster for the Russian ground forces because they're going to encounter all these citizens that are motivated to protect their homeland. This is their home, and this is their country. So this could get very bloody. This could be a very serious situation. You could see a lot of volunteers here. So this is pretty interesting. I thought I would share that with you guys. Here's some more pictures of them training here. And here's another flight path. Here's another C-17 landing in Kiev. This one is a British C-17. Who knows what's on that? Probably more defensive aid. And here's an article from Reuters. Brandon will soon engage France's Macron over the Russia meetings with Putin. So he's going to be speaking with Brandon soon. And here's a picture of some U.S. Army troops in Germany getting ready to move out to Romania, but they were not allowed to answer any questions from the media. Okay, there was assembled media here that were taking pictures of these troops, but they were not allowed to answer any questions. So, this is more than just, deterrence. They're getting ready for possible war with Russia. Here's a NOTAM that was issued. A NOTAM is notice to airmen. Russia is going to be conducting some missile and gunnery exercises in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. These areas in red are where they're going to be doing these exercises. You can see Odessa is right here. Okay, so they're practicing. They're getting ready. They could possibly make an amphibious landing here. They could strike some areas, some Ukrainian positions from the Black Sea. They're getting ready to move on Odessa, and they want to cut off Ukraine from the Black Sea so they can't get reinforcements. Okay, so that's very serious. And here we have some information. U.S. troops in Poland are preparing for potentially Americans fleeing Ukraine. Here's a picture this is from that city I was telling you about, Rzeszów, which is 45 miles from the Ukraine border. You can see all these American Humvees here painted in woodland camo. These are specifically designed for the European theater. You can see here U.S. military Humvees parked outside the G2A arena near Rzeszów Jasionka Airport in Poland. U.S. troops in Poland are preparing to help American citizens who may flee the country if Russia invades Ukraine, U.S. officials said on Wednesday. The officials speak on the condition of anonymity, said the troops would not enter Ukraine to evacuate citizens, but would set up temporary facilities within Poland if needed. The Pentagon has said around 1,700 service members, mainly from the 82nd Airborne Division are deploying from Fort Bragg to Poland. Russia has denied plans to invade Ukraine, but has deployed more than 100,000 troops, blah, blah, blah. So they're saying now 170,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. And if that's what they're saying, you can easily add another 50 or 100,000 on top of what the official number is. As I'm recording this video, there's probably more and more troops moving in, pouring into the border every single day. There's just more and more and more equipment every single day. So it's getting serious, guys. Slovakia just allowed the U.S. to use 2 of its military bases. So Slovakia's parliament has approved a controversial new defense treaty with the United States. The agreement will allow the U.S. military to use 2 Slovak air bases for the next 10 years. Slovakia will meanwhile receive $100 million to modernize their 2 airports here. But you can see there were some protesters here protesting, and there's some police here. But that's pretty serious. The deal signed by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Slovakian Defense Minister Jaroslav Nad on February 3rd. It was approved by 79 members of Slovakia's 150-seat parliament on Wednesday and is expected to be ratified by the president. The so-called Defense Cooperation Agreement was split between lawmakers from Slovakia, 4-party ruling coalition, and the opposition. This is pretty crazy, guys. So Slovakia is going to be giving 2 of their airports to the U.S., allowing them to use them for the next 10 years for military purposes. And in return, the U.S. is going to give Slovakia $100 million to modernize them. So that's pretty serious. So that's pretty much the latest information that I have. I wanted to share all this information with you. Stay tuned to my channel for continuing coverage on the situation in Ukraine. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos on how you can prepare for this whole situation, including continuing my nuclear war survival videos. I'm going to be releasing some more this week. So that's all I got for now, guys. Just make sure you're prepared. Stock up on food and water and supplies. Make sure you have everything you need, because once this war kicks off, it's going to be very hard to find the things that you need. People are going to be panic buying. It's going to be just like the lockdown all over again. So stock up on food, water, medicine, batteries, tools, firearms, ammunition, tactical gear, clothing. Get everything that you need now, okay, before the panic buying starts, because once this war kicks off, it's going to be a whole lot different. So that's pretty much it, guys. Take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps: prepare, practice, and persevere.